Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another session. And I have an awesome presentation scheduled here right now. And my guest here is Miranda. And Miranda is the Chief Customer Officer at a company called Swiftly. And we're going to talk about the core metrics for customer support. Amazing topic. Can't wait to get our hands on it, Miranda.
Yeah, actually, it's the core metrics for customer success, which is a little bit different than customer support, but same idea, I guess.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, no worries. And I'm so happy to be here with everyone and excited to talk about this topic today.
All right, let's dive right in.
All right, bear with me while I share my screen. Um, and let me know, can everybody see that?
Yes, you are good to go.
Wonderful. As Natalie said, I am Miranda Dekonsky. I am the Chief Customer Officer at a company named Swiftly. I'm also the interim head of people there. So I have both the human resource side right now and the customer facing side. Under my umbrella right now, I have customer success, which is the relationship management component. I have tech support. I also have implementations and renewals. So just as an idea of the total scope of what I have under my umbrella. And just a little bit more about me. So I have over 20 years of experience in customer facing operations. I started way back when, actually in customer support, answering phones in a call center. And over the years, I've worked my way and found my way from Michigan out to California and into the startup world. So I started out in very big companies and had shifted about 11 years ago to startup world. And since then, I've been part of 7 different startups. I've had 3 exits of one semblance or another, a couple of IPOs and an acquisition. Yesterday, anyone who's on LinkedIn probably knows there was a big announcement for the customer success community. We announced the top 100 and top 25 CS professionals, and I was very humbled to be nominated as a top 25 CS influencer for 2021. Now, more importantly, I am a mom, a wife, and also a fur mom to 2 cute little Shih Tzus. And also in my spare time, I used to do roller derby. I still am a big hiker, love to ride motorcycle with my husband. And I grew up on a farm in Michigan. So you can see there a little picture of me driving a tractor. And yes, I can drive a tractor. And I love connecting with folks in the CS community. So please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you're on here, if you have questions that I don't answer or things that I don't get to. So quickly hopping into this, I have a huge belief that successful customers equals successful companies. So, of course, we want to balance out what we do between business and customer facing, but it's really important that we put customers at the front and center and understand their desired outcomes and what it takes to make them successful. And if you do that well, you set yourself up for a very strong and successful business. And we are in the age of the customer. So it's even more so now than ever. Customers have a lot of choices. I've talked about this before, but in 2020, we really saw this come front and center. Companies had to really take a look at their budgets and understand where they were spending their monies. And if you were a product or a service that wasn't providing value, you probably were put on the chopping block. But there are various other reasons why a customer could potentially churn. And I like to start out here. So being proactive in the customer success relationship is really crucial. So let's talk about some of the reasons why a customer could potentially churn before we get into all the things we should measure. And I have them listed here, but I'm going to quickly go over them because it's really important. It's really important to reiterate. First and foremost is failure to launch. So I have peeled off implementations in my department because that first experience in your in your software or your tool is incredibly crucial. So making sure you're laser focused on what that implementation is. Next is failure to achieve desired outcomes or ROI, and we're going to touch upon that a little bit more. Bad fit customers, loss to competition, happens all the time, where you have a competitor that comes in because your customer isn't achieving value on your product. Product issues, poor support, lack of product relationship evolution. I've seen this happen a lot, where a smaller company goes with a certain tool and then the company grows and evolves and the tool doesn't grow and evolve with them. So they have to churn or find a different tool. And then, of course, there's also the funding and finances. We're going to go ahead. And so I always like to start with an end goal in mind. So let me see here. I think my slide is delayed. Are you seeing it on your end? So sorry for the technological delay. Okay, so I think it caught up. Thank you for the patience. So I always like to start with an end goal in mind and work backwards. So in this case, you would start with your customer's desired journey, then figure out how you would measure it. I hope to give you all a few ideas around things you can measure to understand if your CS program is helping you move that needle in the right direction for your customers. So I'm going to break out the metrics that I look at into 4 buckets, which I've listed here: outcomes, engagement, sentiment, and maturity. Of course, I just want to call out, this is not the end all be all list or the end all be all categories, but hopefully it's a great place for you to start. I keep getting latency. I apologize. All right, so let's first dig into outcomes. So in almost all cases, customers purchase products or services to solve a particular problem. Whether it's to create more efficiencies, save money, bridge a gap in functionality in another tool, or something else. It's important to know what your customers' desired outcomes are. I've listed out a few things here that I like to measure that kind of point me in the direction of outcomes. First and foremost is return on investment. You're going to hear me say this a lot. I believe return on investment is one of the most impactful measurements that is sure to help you secure a budget for a renewal. ROI, or return on investment, should be at the center of most, if not all, of your customer conversations. So whether it's a project that you're partnering on, change management as teams across the organization adopt your product to save time, or a particular impact that you're making to your customers and users, it's important you track this and deliberately talk about it regularly. It's not enough just to check a box internally and say, we've achieved ROI and celebrate. You actually need to have the conversation and show your customers how you've achieved ROI together and make sure they agree that that is what they were seeking, or that they agree that they've gotten that return on investment. Next is adoption. So I alluded to this a bit in ROI, but it is another part of outcomes, is making sure you partner with your customer to drive strong adoption. Change management at times can be the hardest part of our jobs, but it's also crucial. So you should measure this, create plans to improve it, celebrate wins, wash, rinse, repeat. If you have customers that have purchased your product and they're not adopting, or the change management component isn't managed super well, that is another reason for failure to achieve outcomes. Last on this slide I'll talk about is goals. Again, this feeds directly into ROI as well, but make sure you're partnering with your key contacts to collect their goals. This is not a one and done activity. This should be an ongoing effort. And what this looks like in my world is sometimes the goals that we collect are directly tied to our product, and sometimes they're not. One of the questions I love to ask when I'm in an executive business review or in a call with a customer is, what are the problems you're solving for in the next 6 to 12 months that may have nothing to do with our product? And it gets the conversation started. And then you can kind of figure out, is there different places I can plug the product in to help them achieve those goals? So sorry. All right. That brings us to engagement. So I take engagement just beyond, are they responding to my emails? Well, yes, that's important. We want them responding to our emails and our outreaches. I do give them points for that in my health score, but I also pay close attention to who's not engaging when I'm looking at risk. So it is important. But engagement for me is also how actively my customers participate in key meetings like executive business reviews, and have they participated in case studies? Are they willing to act as references for prospects who want to hear about their experience and so on? I track these at each account level, and it's a very important part of my overall engagement story and my engagement score. Next, so sentiment. This is an easier one, and I'm sure everybody here listening to this right now also tracks sentiment. There have been, however, a lot of conversations right around NPS's value, if it's valuable or not. And I stand by yes. So I'm a believer, though, that while NPS score is great and we should celebrate the wins, it's more about the trend of the overall engagement with your survey than the actual score. Don't get me wrong, higher scores are always better. But if you start with a 60, which is off the charts, and then you start trending downward to 50s or 40s, and 50s and 40s are still awesome scores, you want to pay attention to what's happening with that trend and the reasons behind that. So NPS, CSAT, all of that, very important, but it's more important that you watch the trend. Also, I want to call out that it's important to pay attention to those that are not replying. While silence doesn't always equate to someone being your biggest detractor, if your key contacts are silent and are not responding, you should treat that as a data point as well and make sure you personally follow up. A couple of other metrics that I want to call out, or one other metric I want to call out, is CSAT, which is heavily centered around satisfaction with your support team or a specific interaction. So this is very much so a customer support metric and not as much as a customer success metric. But it's also an important one to monitor to make sure that your customer success organization is driving impact. And the question generally you get with the CSAT score is, are you happy with how your issue was resolved? Or are you happy with the service that you received today? Very important. All right. That brings me to maturity. This simply put is how much of your product has your customer adopted and how sophisticated is their use cases. So this is a great way to help your CSMs understand how to help your customers evolve to that next level. But it's also a great way to help your customers see what investments they could make to drive more value from your product. A maturity matrix or a maturity model, it can be a very powerful tool, not only externally, but also internally. You can use your maturity models to help identify areas of the product that maybe are less adopted, practices that are widely used that you could double down on, and so forth. And I'm a huge believer that maturity model is kind of like your roadmap for the customer and roadmap with the customer on all the things they could do to, provide efficiencies and so on and so forth with your product, depending on what their goals are. Here, I just give a little example of a customer health scorecard. This is an actual customer health scorecard from my portfolio. As you can see on this health scorecard, I have 6 components. And one of the most components that I don't talk about a lot here in this presentation is the manual CSM pulse. We have guidelines at our company of how frequently a customer success manager should be reaching out and partnering with their portfolio. So I'm always looking at these pulses to make sure they're being updated on a regular cadence. The customer success manager should know the ins and outs of what's going on with their portfolio. So to me, the pulse is almost the most important part of the overall scorecard. And I do have a few bullet points here where I call out for you. This is my method, but of course you need to figure out what's right for your customers. So you got to start first and figure out the components that make your a customer successful in your product, and at minimum measure it, and then create a plan to improve or impact or improve the overall score. Board deck. Okay, so lastly, this is like a super simple slide, and I present to the board every single month. Yeah, I have monthly board meetings, and I like to keep it super simple so it doesn't take me a ton of time to get prepped. Every month, I present net retention, NRR, gross renewal, and NPS. So, fortunately, my stats are pretty solid. With my net retention consistently being above 110% and sometimes upwards of 120%. My gross retention is always above 90% and sometimes upwards of 95. And my NPS is at 70 right now, which I'm very proud of. We as a team have increased it from 30 up to 70 over the past 2.5 years. So depending on what your board cares about, you may need to change it up a little bit. But I keep finding board after board after board that they just want you to keep it simple and focus on what matters, which tends to be growth, retention, and sentiment. It paints a simple picture and gives a quick snapshot into the health of the overall business. All right. Lastly, I just want to call out, if you have nothing, start somewhere, and keep it simple. Establish your baseline metrics and then create improvement goals. So it's important. If you have nothing, just start somewhere. And then start with a customer journey map. What does success look like along the journey, and how are you going to measure that success? That's the key. You'll hear that as a constant theme with me, is you measure and then create improvement goals, and then measure again and create improvement goals, and then act upon that. But I also want to call out, you can measure everything, but should you? So make sure you know what's important, what's nice to know, and what can be left behind. Getting started on this can be quite overwhelming. So it's important to start simple and see if that tells the story to you that you need to know about the overall health of your customer success organization. And if it doesn't, then you go back out and you look at other numbers and other metrics and so on and so forth, and continue to iterate. All right. Any questions?
Perfect. We do have a few questions here. The first one is from Chris, and Chris is asking, what are your thoughts on a customer effort score survey and how
That's
it can work together with CSAT?
That's funny, Chris, because when I finished up my presentation last night, I had customer effort score in there, and I actually took it off. I'm going to be completely candid. I've not used customer effort score a lot, so I can't speak to it heavily. It is something I dabbled with a little bit in a previous company that was more of like a B2C, or a B2B tech touch, but I'm in B2B enterprise right now, and I've not used it. So I did put it in there, and I thought, you know what? I haven't used it in a couple of years. I'm not going to talk about it. So,
David, who is the CEO of a company called the Customer.co, by the way, is asking this question. Do you report CS productivity to the board?
no. And the reason why it has not come up. However, I do have to be very cognizant of the CS productivity and partner closely with my CFO to make sure the productivity numbers match my forecasting, and that I'm not just bringing in more, I'm not solving problems with bodies, that I'm thinking through how can I use my processes to get better, my tools, and so on and so forth. But we do not report CS productivity to the board at this time.
Jenny is a customer success manager with Cadence, and she's asking, can you dive deeper into the customer health and how to determine our baseline metrics, as well as when we should reassess?
Okay, so can you dive deeper into customer health and how to determine our baseline? So, every time I go in to build out a brand new CS org and I'm thinking about my customer health, I always start with, what is the customer journey? What are the problems my customers tend to be solving, whether it's efficiencies or so on and so forth, and how am I going to measure that? There's always, let me go back a couple slides. Let me see if I can. There's always going to be some kind of variation depending on your product and your tools. But of course, you want to do something around usage and adoption. You want to have that manual pulse in there. I like to include NPS. Some people don't. I also have what I call my scorecard. And the scorecard for me is it's actually a long scorecard that creates a little bit of gamification in my team to where we want to see how many of our modules the customers adopted. So the scorecard includes a check mark for each of the modules that could potentially be adopted in our product, case studies, references. Are we absorbing multiple data feeds? Because multiple data feeds in our product makes the product more stickier. So thinking through those types of things for your particular product, like what makes a customer stay, what makes a customer sticky, and how do you know you're driving value and your customers are achieving outcomes. I also have something for tenure, but I'm in government tech, so tenure is really important. Getting to RFP or renewal again and again and again is a really big thing. So a customer who's not been with us very long is more at risk than one that has been with us 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So we get points for that as well. And then engagement, which I touched upon. I don't know if that answers the direct question, but the long-winded answer to this is really start with your customer's desired experience, not the companies, but your customers, and then back into it from there and figure out how you're going to measure that.
And is saying it totally answered the question. Thank you for that. Now we have a question from another Jenny, and she's asking, "What does your customer-facing scorecard look like for your QBRs?"
Yeah, so we don't do QBRs, we do executive business reviews. So we don't do them quarterly. Same idea, just different nomenclature and different cadence. Our actual presentation for our executive business reviews do include a slide with all the goals that we agreed upon and the progress of where they are. We include hard and soft ROI measurements. So hard ROI is, we saved X amount of time, or we created efficiencies in your route, which shaved off X amount of hours, right? So it's very hard. Soft ROI is more around maybe employee engagement or sentiment. So we include those types of things. We also do product roadmap conversations right in our executive business reviews, so they can see what we have coming up as well that may solve for future needs. And then we collect future goals. So we want to know right there, and this is usually it's the executives that are in and the key stakeholders all in the same meeting. So it's a pretty big moment for the folks that have been partnering with us to make them shine. So we always want to make the key sponsors or our stakeholders at the agencies shine in front of their executives, and then also show the executives what more we could do together.
All right, let's see if there are any other questions. Feel free to drop them here in the chat or in the Q&A section. How do you collect? Let's see. How do you collect and keep your customer data up to date as an input for your measurement?
We use a customer success tool. So everything that we have is housed there, and we're able to report on it from there. I don't know if that answers the question.
Jenny is also asking, our team, hold on. Our team is trialing several CES platforms. And what would be your advice for features, automations that are must-haves?
Jenny, that's a really good question. And I hate to say this, but it really depends on your product and what you're trying to solve for most, right? So there are so many great CS platforms and CS tools out there that do various things. There are some that specialize more in tech touch, and they're going to help you with automation and really using data to drive decisions. And then there are some out there that are probably more geared towards B2B enterprise with heavy touch. And then there are some that do everything and the dishes, and laundry. So I hate to be so vague, but it really depends on what you're looking for. What I suggest doing is going through and creating a spreadsheet with a needs assessment and write out your needs, okay? And then in each column, put the different platforms. And when you're demoing or you're speaking to the salesperson at these platforms, start checking the boxes off. And then at the end, it's going to tell you whoever has the most boxes checked for your needs is who you would probably move forward with.
He is asking, what success platform do you use?
I am going to decline to say. You can please feel free to PM me and on LinkedIn, and I will let you know what I use then.
Next question, how do you motivate your team to update the data timely into the customer success tool?
We have a bonus structure. I don't believe in commission for CS, but there is a bonus structure that is tied around gross renewal, net retention, and NPS. And they have to be moving their portfolio in the right direction. And there is a big accountability of making sure your pulses are updated within the regular cadence, and it's all tied together. And also, quite frankly, it's just part of their job. There is no motivation, it's just an expectation. And I've never had an issue, a big issue. I will say sometimes you get a couple folks that are stragglers, but I've never had a big issue of getting folks to go in and update the data. They should be.
Awesome. You've tackled so many questions, Miranda. Thank you so much. Any other questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or in the chat. But looks like we are right at the tail end of the session. Miranda, any last parting words, anything else you want to share, and where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, no parting words. I think we covered it pretty well. And please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me. I'm not a Twitter user or anything else like that, even though I have a Twitter, but I'm all over LinkedIn. And it was so nice to see some of the names I recognize and friendly faces in the audience. So thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll see you in the next session in a couple of minutes. Bye, everyone.